I cooked in my grandmother's pan for 35 years until one day up on the chop tank at our house there, we'd finished breakfast and I was walking out into the yard to scrape something out of the pan into the compost pile. I dropped the pan, it tumbled down the stairs, and I could hear it going ding, 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 clunk. And on the clunk, I knew that it had cracked. I sat down with it in my hand. My wife says that I was crying. I wasn't crying, but the engineer in me was making me think again back to that experience with that fellow in my hardware store, which was why did that one look like this and all the rest of them look like that? And I also realized that the pan that I had hoped I would give to my kids was broken. That was September 15th, 2013. And fairly shortly afterwards, my very supportive wife said, you've been curious about this for a long time. Why don't you figure it out? So I did for several years with classes at the University of Pittsburgh in metallurgy and traveling around the country. By the 1950s, most of the process was mechanized, and the speed at which this is made, this is a Chinese pan, but this comes out of an automatic molding machine. It's a vertical molding machine, and it comes out in about 90 minutes. Whereas this pan from Griswold, which was back early, was called Erie, would have taken about 4 days. Our pans take 21 days. If this can be made in 90 minutes, then the materials necessary to produce that part and get it into a box and get it onto a truck and get it out of the door is a much smaller amount of real estate than this is. And the reason our production is quite limited is because it's certainly much less than the 20-something days that it takes us to make ours. When we started looking at why these old pans were so different than the new ones, I had a mission. I was going to make 2 of them. One for each one of my sons. That's all I was really interested in. It wasn't a business, and it wasn't it was an intellectual exercise with the purpose of finding out why these were so different and then make 2. We didn't realize that there is not any cast iron produced in the United States that's made at that wall thickness. There is not any cast iron that's made at that smoothness. So it took a long time to figure that out. But at a certain point we realized that it would be impossible to reproduce this pan the way it was made in the late 19th century. We finally partnered with a foundry in Pennsylvania, and they also said, you can't do it. And I, again, foolishly said, well, if I establish a R&D budget to pay you to fail? You say we can't do it. I believe you, but I still want to spend a certain amount of time. This was my wife saying, "You're going to school. There's money involved in classes. You're just going to spend it as though you were in class." And they said, "Fine." 6 months and a certain number of molds that we would go through. We went through that entire time period. We had no success. Not a single uncracked mold for the entire time period. But these guys make 2 other things. They make the pump valve body for a nuclear submarine, and they make a mounting plate for an F-16 fighter plane gun. So they're not exactly shabby sort of backyard foundry. I mean, by the end of our R&D period, they were so wrapped up in why why was our part the most difficult thing that they'd ever been asked to make, and they'll still tell you that to this day, that they make nothing that is more difficult than this. Yep. So they put in another 6 months and failed, and then we in our last few molds we finally came out with one single pan. This is the first pan. Those are the signatures of all of the other foundrymen and engineers who worked with me to make this. And this is the most expensive cast iron pan ever to be made, I can guarantee you.